So with the background in enumeration, we can move on to some of the tools and techniques. One tool we can start with right off the bat is the good old Nmap. And we can use it, first of all, we try to fingerprint the operating system. So we'll say Nmap dash capital O and then whatever the target is. Or Nmap dash small s capital V and then whatever the target is. Now and you can do both of these. You can say Nmap dash capital O dash small s cap V, the target. So you can have any number of these switches together. Very few don't go together. So with that, we can see the operating system version, which will imply things like defaults right off the bat. We can see service versions as well, and that will also imply information about those. And then let's say we discover that this thing is running SMB. So we see it's talking on 139 and 445. We can then go, aha, let's run a script, SMB OS discovery, or SMB user enum, or something to enumerate information out of SMB. We could use another tool, here's a little goodie from Kali Linux, actually just Linux, called RPC Client. And RPC Client it'll give you huge amounts of information, especially if you have some username. Now, here's the thing about querying NetBIOS and then querying Active Directory. And Active Directory is not NetBIOS based, okay? But here's the thing. Let's say that you know the IP address of a domain controller in Active Directory. Any user who is a member of an Active Directory domain has the right to query pretty much anything in the entire database. So if I can talk Susie Q's username and password out of her by bribing her with a chocolate bar or something, and I can just plug her into an RPC client query, I can dump pretty much anything out of the Active Directory database, with the exception of things like password hashes and maybe certain policies. But I can dump the existence of every user, group, computer, OU, general policy. I can dump all of that just by having a normal standard user. So RPC client, you say RPC client and then the target IP, and then tac cap u, the username like Susie Q or whatever, and then it'll prompt you for the password. And then you start asking questions like server info, or look up names, and then you put in a name. It'll give you all the information about that name. Or look up SIDs, you put in security IDs. If you don't have a username, you do it the null session way. You say RPC client tac cap u, double quote, with no space here, and then the target domain controller or the target machine. And you can still get a fair amount of stuff even without a username. You can also use Metasploit. Metasploit has a number of modules to do enumeration. So like here's just one example. Most of the enumeration modules fall in the auxiliary group, the auxiliary category, in the scanner subcategory, and then you go by protocol like SMB, and then you go to the actual module. So this one is SMB underscore lookup SID. And then you set some parameters like, I know a user named Moo. I talked his name and password out of him at a bar last night. And then using Moo, I want to query the minimum and maximum number of relative IDs. In other words, tell me all the users starting with 1,000, which is the very first user-created user. Tell me the first 100 users that were ever created. And then you set the target. So these are just some examples of enumeration. There are jillions of tools. Jillion is a technical term, depending upon the protocol and the port. So if you're going, say, after FTP, port 21, loads of tools, Telnet, Nmap, Metasploit. There are loads of tools here. And we can get FTP servers and versions and authentication requirements, including if they permit anonymous logins. If we're querying SSH, we can use Nmap or PuTTY, or we can use Nmap scripts or Metasploit also. And SSH typically is what runs on Linux servers and routers and switches or other network devices, or jailbroken iPhones. People don't realize that they usually, when you jailbreak an iPhone, you have an SSH server just waiting in the background for someone to connect. And all I have to do is look up the default username and password. Well, the username in an iPhone is root, and the password is, well, you can look it up on the internet. Like, for example, if you have an iPhone 4, it's going to be Alpine. So, and then for Telnet, TCP/23, again, we have all these tools that we can use. You are not expected to memorize these tools, but just so you can see, there are loads of possibilities. For SMTP, loads of possibilities. For DNS, there's dig, NSLOOKUP, Nmap scripts, Metasploit, and there's even more than just this. For HTTP, there's dirbuster and lots of Nmap scripts, loads of Nmap scripts, loads of Metasploit modules, plus any number of other tools we're going to see. If you're going after a remote procedure call, you've got the Microsoft version or the Nix version here. We've got a variety of scripts and tools to query for information about like what services are talking, like Windows DCOM or NLock Manager or Quote AD or Mount D, so we can find out information about those. And then the NetBIOS ones, 137, 139, loads and loads of tools here, including, especially for SMB, we've got Enum for Linux, SMB client, a lot of Nmap scripts, Metasploit modules as well. SNMP, loads of tools, GetIF, SolarWinds, PRTG, What's Up Gold, Nagios, Spiceworks, Observium, other scripts as well. I've used a number of these SNMP tools. For LDAP, for Microsoft Active Directory, just use Active Directory users and computers, or NTDS Util, or OpenLDAP, or LDAP Admin, or LDP, and additional modules, just to query the Active Directory database for everything. Or for 445, RPC client, and then a bunch of scripts, PowerShell, PS tools, user to SID, SID to user, Enum. For SQL, maybe there's a SQL server. There's Nmap, there's Metasploit modules, and other SQL querying tools. So that is an overview of the services and ports and tools we can use with a few examples for enumerating information.